If you're reading this right now, I don't think it's by chance. Maybe your thumb hovered over the next video and something made you stop. Maybe a quiet voice inside said, "This one's different." What if this turns out to be one of those small, unremarkable moments that later becomes the reason everything changed, simply because you decided to stay a little longer? And if you're the woman I've pictured for longer than I can explain, then maybe this was always going to reach you eventually. Not because we've met before, but because somewhere in you there's still a belief that love doesn't fade as the years pass. It changes shape instead. It gets quieter, deeper, less concerned with looking impressive and far more concerned with being real. So stay a while. There's something I've wanted to say to my future wife for a long time now, and I'd like to say it here. Someone once told me that most people listen closely to things like this without ever clicking like or subscribing, and I understood why. Maybe it's simply easier to protect your heart quietly than to announce that something touched you. If this conversation makes you feel a little less alone tonight, staying connected matters more for you than it ever could for me. So tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? And if someone you care about needs to hear this too, pass it along quietly. Let them know they don't have to carry everything by themselves. I've spent a good part of my life building things that didn't exist the day before. People assume that kind of work starts with intelligence. It doesn't. It starts with belief, the willingness to trust that something invisible can eventually become solid and real. Love works the same way, oddly enough. The world rewards certainty. It applauds people who always seem to know exactly where they're headed. But love has never belonged to the certain. It belongs to the people willing to walk into the unknown together without a guarantee of how it ends. That might be why I've come to admire women who've lived enough to know that perfection stopped being attractive a long time ago. What's attractive now is peace, kindness, an evening where nobody has to perform. If you're watching this and you've crossed 50, I want to tell you something most people won't say out loud. You haven't missed your window. You're not sitting at the tail end of your story, waiting quietly for whatever's left. You're still in motion. You're still becoming someone. And often, the deepest kind of love shows up only after you've stopped chasing the version of it everyone else expected you to want. Have you noticed that before? Has there been a point where you realized the relationship you actually needed wasn't the one that photographed well, but the one where your whole body finally relaxed? I'd like to know. Tell me in the comments what first made you believe love was real. Was it something someone said, or was it the way they made silence feel comfortable instead of awkward? I think about silence often. Not the empty, uncomfortable kind, but the kind where two people can simply exist together without feeling obligated to fill every gap with conversation. That's rare, and it matters more than people realize. Real closeness isn't measured by how much you talk. It's measured by how easy the quiet moments become. When I picture my future wife, I don't picture someone who nods along with everything I say. That would grow tiresome fast. I picture someone who pushes back gently, who's curious enough to ask the harder questions, who tells me when I'm wrong, not to win, but because she wants us both to grow. If this is resonating with you, a like on this video helps more than you'd think. And if you'd consider subscribing, we're trying to reach 10,000 people who might need to hear something like this. Every new person who joins tells me these words are landing somewhere they're needed. And if there's someone in your life who might be quietly searching for a bit of hope today, send this their way. You never know whose day it might turn around. Winning an argument has never once built lasting love. Understanding has, every time. Here's something worth sitting with. Machines get more efficient with age. People don't. We get more complicated instead. We carry old memories into new beginnings. We measure today's chances against yesterday's letdowns. We build walls and call them wisdom, and some of those walls genuinely protect us, while others quietly become our prison. The hardest problem I've ever worked on isn't engineering or rockets. It's convincing a heart that's been hurt before that it's still safe to hope again. Maybe you've loved someone who eventually left. Maybe you stayed with someone who'd already stopped loving you long before they walked out the door. Maybe you've grown so used to being independent that letting someone care for you now feels strange, almost uncomfortable. If any of that sounds familiar, let me ask you something. When was the last time someone looked at you, not to judge, not because they wanted something from you, but simply to see you? I believe every person deserves to be seen that way. Not for what they've achieved, not for how they look, not for their title or status, but for who they are underneath all of it. That's where love actually starts. Everything else is just decoration around it. I've come to understand that admiration can spark a relationship, and chemistry can make it exciting, and shared dreams can strengthen it further. But only emotional safety allows it to actually last. If I ever meet the woman this was somehow meant for, I hope she never feels like she has to compete with my ambitions, my work, or my goals. Love was never supposed to feel like a rivalry against someone's career or their future plans. Love should be the place both people return to after they've spent the day facing that future separately. The world outside is loud enough already. A relationship doesn't need to add to the noise. Sometimes all a person actually needs is one sentence. I'm here. Not because everything is suddenly fixed, but because nobody should have to sit with uncertainty completely alone. What does it mean to you to be cherished? Not admired, not desired, but cherished. There's a real difference between those things. Desire tends to be temporary. It can fade with time or distance. But being cherished works the opposite way. It deepens the longer time goes on. That's probably why I've grown less interested in grand, dramatic moments and far more drawn to the ordinary ones instead. Making coffee together in the morning. Walking somewhere with no particular hurry to get there. Watching rain fall against a window without needing to say a single word about it. Laughing at the same story you've both already told 100 times before. None of those moments would ever make headlines, and yet somehow they're the ones people miss the most when they're gone. People often ask what success actually looks like, and my answer to that has shifted quite a bit over the years. Success now looks like waking up next to someone who's seen every flawed, unfinished version of you and still quietly chooses you again the next morning. Not out of obligation, but because they genuinely want to. Maybe that's the real definition of love. Not one enormous, defining moment, but 1,000 small choices made one after another, day after day, year after year, until they add up to something solid. And if you're still with me, there's something I've never quite managed to explain using logic alone. There was a single realization about my future wife that reshaped the way I think about love entirely. It didn't happen during some celebration or after a big win. It wasn't in front of a crowd, and it wasn't the moment some impossible idea suddenly worked. It happened in total silence. I realized that the deepest fear in life isn't failure, and it isn't rejection either, and it isn't even loneliness. The deepest fear is finally meeting the right person after you've already convinced yourself you no longer deserve to be loved. That thought has stayed with me ever since, because somewhere, maybe at this very moment, there's a woman watching these words while quietly carrying questions she's never said out loud to anyone. She's the one who smiles for everyone else. She encourages the people around her without fail. She tells her children they're enough exactly as they are. She reminds her friends that life will get lighter again soon. And yet, when the room finally goes quiet and she's alone with her own thoughts, she wonders why those same reassuring words are so hard to believe about herself. If that's you, I hope you stay a little longer. Not because I have every answer to give you, but because sometimes one person's hope can hold steady until yours is strong enough to carry itself again. I've noticed something strange about people in general. We tend to forgive strangers far more easily than we forgive ourselves. Someone else makes a mistake, and we instantly imagine the pressure they were probably under. We offer them understanding, context, compassion without a second thought. But when we make that same mistake ourselves, we suddenly become our own harshest critic. Why is that? Why does kindness flow so freely toward others and dry up completely when it's aimed at ourselves? Have you ever forgiven everyone around you except the one person who actually needed it most, which was you? If that's true for you, tell me honestly, because I don't believe you're alone in that. When I picture the woman I hope to spend my life with, I'm not picturing someone who's never doubted herself. I'm picturing someone who has. Someone who knows exactly what disappointment tastes like and has swallowed it more than once. Someone who understands that tears were never a sign of weakness, but proof that her heart never stopped caring, even when caring got difficult. Life has a strange way of shaping people, and it rarely does that through comfort. It usually does it through pressure. Diamonds aren't formed because everything around them was easy, and neither are people who've grown into something extraordinary. That's probably why I believe mature love carries a different kind of beauty than the young, dramatic version people write songs about. It isn't built on fantasy. It's built on plain truth. And truth sounds different than fantasy. It says, I know you've changed, and I know I have too. I know neither of us is perfect anymore, if we ever were, but I still choose to keep learning who you're becoming. Isn't that really what commitment means at its core? Not a promise that tomorrow will be simple, but a promise that tomorrow won't have to be faced completely alone. I think most people spend too much energy asking whether they've found the right person for them. Maybe there's a better question hiding underneath that one. Have we become the kind of person someone else could safely build a future with? That question changed something in me, because it's always easier to hold expectations of another person than it is to build your own character. And character tends to be quiet. It shows up when nobody's watching closely. It's in how gently you speak after a hard, frustrating day. It's in whether your apology carries more weight than your pride does. It's in whether you protect someone's peace instead of demanding they protect your ego instead. None of that shows up in a photograph, but it becomes the actual foundation underneath every relationship that manages to last. Can I ask you something a bit more personal? What actually makes you feel emotionally safe with another person? Is it honesty, or consistency, or gentleness, or shared laughter? Or is it simply someone remembering the small details that everyone else tends to forget? I'd genuinely like to know, because I think every answer carries a story behind it worth hearing. As I've gotten older, I've stopped believing that love is about finding someone who completes you. It's a beautiful idea on the surface, but it quietly places an impossible weight on another human being. No one can actually complete another person. What two people can do instead is build a space where each of them becomes more fully themselves. That's a very different thing, and a much healthier one. Picture coming home after a day that's worn you down completely. Picture opening the door and feeling your shoulders drop immediately, not because every problem in your life has vanished, but because one person makes the world feel lighter just by being there. That's the kind of home I imagine for myself. Not the walls or the furniture or even the address, but a person, a presence, a heartbeat nearby that reminds you you're not fighting through life on your own anymore. People often assume romance is built from grand gestures, expensive dinners, dream vacations, elaborate surprises. Those things are nice enough, but real romance tends to live somewhere much quieter than that. It lives in remembering exactly how she takes her coffee. It lives in noticing she's gone unusually quiet before she's even said a word about having a hard day. It lives in asking, "How was your heart today?" instead of just asking, "How was your day?" There's a real difference between those two questions. One asks about the events that happened. The other asks about the person who lived through them. That's where real intimacy actually begins to take root. Sometimes I wonder if we've become so connected through our phones and screens that we've quietly forgotten how to actually notice one another. We can send a message across the entire planet in seconds, and yet some couples haven't truly seen each other in years. Looking at someone isn't the same as seeing them. Seeing means paying attention. It means remembering. It means caring enough to notice a change in someone before they even find the words to explain it themselves. If my future wife ever comes across these words, I want her to know something clearly. I won't expect her to carry every burden in silence. Strength was never about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Real strength is trusting someone enough to say, quietly, "I'm struggling right now." I hope she never feels embarrassed by being vulnerable, because vulnerability is exactly how love finds its way into places that pride could never reach on its own. Have you ever hidden your own pain because you didn't want to become someone else's burden? I think a lot of people have done that, especially women who've spent decades looking after everyone else around them. You became the safe place for your children, your family, your friends, your parents, for practically everyone in your life. But who became that safe place for you? Who ever asked if you were okay without expecting the answer to simply be, "I'm fine"? Maybe that's part of why this conversation matters. Not because it solves every mystery about love, but because for a few minutes, you might finally be allowing yourself to feel seen. And that alone might be where healing quietly begins. There's another thought I return to often. Time changes everything it touches. It changes faces, it changes bodies, it changes ambitions, it changes daily routines. But it also reveals something remarkable underneath all of that. Time eventually strips away the performance we all put on, and what's left afterward is simply who we really are underneath. That's part of why I don't fear getting older. What I actually fear is growing older without becoming any kinder, without gaining more patience, without learning to love a little more gently than I did the year before. Because what's the real value of gaining knowledge if your heart never grows any wiser alongside it? I hope the woman meant for me isn't drawn in by perfection. I hope she's comforted instead by plain honesty. I hope she laughs easily and often. I hope silence never makes her uneasy. I hope she still believes tomorrow has the ability to surprise her in good ways. And I hope she understands something it's taken me a long time to learn myself. Love isn't measured by how loudly it's declared to the world. It's measured by how faithfully it's lived out, on every ordinary Tuesday, through every difficult conversation, through every unexpected disappointment, and every quiet sunrise that comes after. That's where forever actually gets built. Not in one unforgettable day, but across thousands of ordinary moments that slowly turn into something extraordinary simply because they were shared with someone. If you've experienced a love like that before, even briefly, tell me what it felt like. And if you haven't yet, please don't lose hope over it. The heart has a remarkable ability to bloom again, even after seasons that felt like they'd never end. Sometimes the longest winters are exactly what prepare us for the most beautiful springs that follow. And there's one last truth I've never said out loud until now. It was never really about finding the perfect woman, and it was never about becoming the perfect man either. It was about recognizing one quiet moment, the exact point where two lives stop moving in parallel lines and finally start moving in the same direction together. That single moment changed everything I thought I understood about love up to that point. And what happened afterward was something I honestly never expected. What happened after that wasn't dramatic in any obvious way. There were no fireworks, no swelling music, no perfectly scripted scene like something out of a movie. It was much quieter than any of that. It was simply the realization that love doesn't usually arrive announcing itself loudly. It tends to arrive disguised as something ordinary. A conversation that runs longer than either of you expected. A laugh that somehow feels strangely familiar, even the first time you hear it. Someone remembering a small detail you mentioned weeks earlier, one you'd already forgotten yourself. Someone simply asking if you've eaten yet today. Someone noticing that your smile reached your lips but never quite made it to your eyes. None of those moments look extraordinary from the outside, and yet they quietly end up changing the entire direction of a life. If you're still with me here, maybe you've experienced something like that yourself before. Maybe you've met someone who made time feel different somehow. Not faster and not slower exactly, just lighter to carry. I've spent a large part of my life believing the future was something built only through intelligence, discipline, and sheer determination. I still think those things matter a great deal, but they're incomplete on their own. Because no matter how remarkable a destination turns out to be, arriving there completely alone eventually starts to feel strangely hollow. Success is a curious thing when you really look at it. The world celebrates it loudly and publicly. People admire the headlines, the achievements, the moment something impossible becomes real and undeniable. But they rarely ask what actually happens once the applause has faded away. Silence happens. Eventually, every accomplishment gets followed by quiet, and in that quiet, the questions turn personal fast. Who do I actually call right now? Who genuinely understands what today meant to me? Who knew the version of me that existed before anyone else ever noticed my name? Who reminds me that I'm loved even on the days I accomplish absolutely nothing at all? Those questions matter far more than most people give them credit for, because a career can define what you do with your time. Only love reminds you of who you actually are underneath that. I hope my future wife understands something clearly. I don't need someone to admire me. Admiration feels pleasant enough, and respect is genuinely valuable to have. But neither one is quite the same thing as acceptance. Acceptance says, I know your strengths and I see them clearly. Love goes a step further and says, I know your weaknesses too, and I'm still here anyway. That's the real difference between the two. When people are young, they're often chasing excitement above everything else. As they get older, many start searching for peace instead. Not because excitement stops being appealing, but because peace slowly becomes priceless in comparison. That's probably part of why I'm speaking to you this way, especially if you've lived long enough already to know that real relationships aren't built by avoiding every storm that comes along. They're built by discovering exactly who keeps holding your hand while that storm is actually happening around you both. Has someone ever stayed with you, not because life happened to be easy at the time, but because leaving simply never became an option in their heart? If you've had that, tell me about that person. And if you haven't yet, tell me what kind of love you're still hoping to find someday. I read stories from people scattered all over the world, different countries, different languages, entirely different histories behind them. And yet the deepest hopes people carry sound remarkably similar across all of it. I want to feel chosen. I want someone who actually listens. I want someone who stays through the hard parts too. It's strange when you think about it. Technology keeps making our daily lives more complicated by the year, and yet the human heart keeps quietly asking for the exact same simple things it always has. To be seen, to be heard, to be valued, to be loved without conditions attached. Sometimes I picture meeting the woman this message was always meant to reach. Not in some perfectly staged setting, either. Maybe she's reading a book somewhere quiet. Maybe she's watching rain fall past her window right now. Maybe she's sitting in the stillness after everyone else in the house has already gone to sleep. Maybe she's wondering whether this particular chapter of her life still has any unexpected joy left waiting in it. If that happens to be you, please don't underestimate what the future still has in store. The future has surprised me more times than I could possibly count by now. Some of the most meaningful moments of my life arrived long after I'd already convinced myself I understood exactly how everything would unfold from there. Life smiled quietly and proved me wrong anyway. Maybe it'll do the exact same thing for you eventually. Can I tell you something I've genuinely never believed? Not even once? I've never believed that love comes with an expiration date attached to it. The calendar keeps changing, our appearance keeps changing, our daily routines keep shifting, but the basic human need to love and be loved in return stays remarkably constant through all of it. Maybe your hair has turned silver by now. Maybe your children are fully grown and gone. Maybe you've experienced real loss along the way. Maybe you've felt disappointment that words still struggle to fully capture, even now. None of that makes your heart any less worthy of love. If anything, it makes it more beautiful, because every scar you carry tells the story of someone who refused to stop loving despite already knowing exactly how much love can hurt when it goes wrong. That takes real courage, far more courage than simply pretending not to care in the first place. People often mistake emotional distance for strength, but I never have. Real strength is staying kind even after life has handed you plenty of reasons to turn bitter instead. Real strength is still believing in tomorrow even after yesterday broke something inside you. Real strength is choosing tenderness in a world that constantly rewards hardness and self-protection instead. That's the kind of woman I admire most. Not because she never cried through hard seasons, but because she never let pain become the whole of who she was. I've learned another lesson along the way too. Love doesn't ask us to become someone else entirely. It quietly invites us to become more honest instead, to set the masks down, to stop performing for approval, to stop trying to earn affection by becoming whatever version of ourselves we think someone else wants to see. A relationship built the right way doesn't require constant acting from either person. It feels closer to finally exhaling after holding your breath for years without realizing it. Imagine waking up each morning next to someone who knows your fears, your habits, your quiet insecurities, and even the dreams you're almost embarrassed to admit you still have. And instead of using any of that against you, they protect it carefully. That's one of the purest forms of love I can picture, protection rather than possession. There's a real difference between the two. Possession says, you belong to me. Love says, your happiness matters to me. Possession tends to create fear over time. Love creates freedom instead. I hope my future wife never feels smaller standing beside me. I hope she feels larger instead, braver, more at peace, more fully herself than she was before. Because if love ever requires one person to disappear so the other can shine brighter, that was never love to begin with. Real love expands both lives at once. It doesn't shrink either one down to make room. Sometimes I wonder whether, right now, somewhere out there, she's watching these very words without realizing they're speaking directly to a hope she's quietly held onto for years. Maybe she almost scrolled past this. Maybe something inside her whispered, "Stay," and she listened to it. If that's what happened, I'm genuinely grateful. Not for the views or the numbers, but because two hearts crossing paths like this is one of the rarest, most meaningful things that can happen at all. Before we get to where this is headed, I want to leave you with a few questions. Not to answer for my sake, but for your own. When was the last time you truly forgave yourself for something? What dream have you quietly convinced yourself you're too old to chase anymore? What kind of love are you still afraid to believe actually exists out there? And if someone worthy of your heart walked into your life tomorrow, would you even recognize them when they did? Or have your past disappointments taught you to close the door before hope even gets the chance to knock on it? Sit with those questions for a while. Don't rush toward easy answers. Sometimes the most important conversations we have are the ones that happen in complete silence, just between us and ourselves. If this message reached you today, maybe it wasn't because you needed someone to promise you that love is guaranteed to show up on schedule. Maybe you simply needed a reminder that hope is still reasonable to hold on to, that your story isn't finished yet, that your heart hasn't missed its chance completely, that somewhere between all the plans we carefully make and all the surprises life keeps delivering anyway, there's still room left for one extraordinary connection. One that begins, quite simply, with two ordinary people choosing honesty over fear. And if my future wife ever does hear these words someday, I hope she takes away this above everything else I've said. I won't promise her a perfect life together. I won't promise that every single day will be easy between us. I won't promise we'll never disagree on anything important. What I will promise is to listen before I assume anything, to stay before I ever consider surrendering, to choose kindness even when pride would feel easier in the moment, to protect her peace just as carefully as I protect my own, to keep learning who she is, even decades after the day we first met each other, because love was never something you find just once and keep forever without effort. It's something you build, one conversation at a time, one honest apology at a time, one shared sunrise at a time, one quiet act of faith after another. If these words reminded you that your heart still deserves to be cherished properly, then maybe they've already accomplished exactly what they were meant to. Take care of your own heart first. Be patient with your story, even the slow chapters. And never underestimate what tomorrow might quietly bring your way when you least expect it. Before you go, I'd like you to try something that has nothing to do with this video at all. When your screen finally goes dark, resist the urge to rush straight back into the noise of everything else. Give yourself 60 quiet seconds first. No phone in hand, no distractions pulling at you, no particular expectations either. Just breathe and ask yourself one simple question. What kind of love do I still genuinely believe is possible for me? Not the love the world once told you to settle for. Not the love that let you down before. Not the love that broke your trust and left you more careful than you used to be. The love that brings peace instead of confusion. The love that makes you feel safe instead of constantly uncertain. The love that looks at your age and sees a collection of beautiful stories instead of just a number on a page. If you're a woman who spent years quietly taking care of everyone else around you, I hope someone reminds you today that your own heart deserves care too, and not as an afterthought. You deserve to be listened to the same way you listen to others. You deserve to be understood without having to explain everything twice. You deserve to laugh until your stomach actually hurts from it. You deserve mornings filled with calm instead of low-grade anxiety humming underneath everything. You deserve evenings where the silence feels comforting, simply because you're sharing it with someone who genuinely knows you by now. And if life hasn't brought that particular person into your story just yet, please don't mistake not yet for never. The future has a strange habit of showing up right when we've nearly stopped expecting anything from it at all. Sometimes the best chapters of a story get written well after the pages we assumed were the ending. If any of this meant something to you while you were listening, I'd genuinely like to hear from you. Tell me, in your own words, one thing you hope a future partner might say to you someday, something you've never actually heard from anyone before. I read through these stories because they remind me that behind every screen, there's a real person carrying real dreams, real memories, and a real, beating heart underneath it all. If this conversation gave you even a small amount of hope tonight, consider leaving a like quietly, just so we can keep having conversations like this one going forward. And if you'd like to stick around for more, subscribing helps, because there's a lot more I still want to say about love, about purpose, about resilience, and about the kind of future we're all quietly trying to build for ourselves, piece by piece. And if someone's face came to mind while you were listening to any part of this, don't keep these words to yourself. Send this along to them. You genuinely never know which message ends up arriving at exactly the right moment to change someone's entire day, or maybe even more than just their day. Thank you for giving me something far more valuable than views or clicks. Your time, your attention, your trust in sitting with all of this. Those aren't things that can ever really be replaced once they're given. Until we talk again, take care of your heart the way you'd take care of someone you love. Protect your peace fiercely. Be patient with your own journey, even on the days it feels slow. And keep believing that genuine love still exists out there somewhere, because the future isn't only built from good ideas and hard work. It's built from courage. It's built from hope. And sometimes, it's built by two people who simply refuse to stop believing in each other, even when believing feels like the harder choice.